1Password moving to Electron. Does it really matter? This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by TextExpander by Smile, the makers of world-class software. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more and download your free demo. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's Tuesday night. This is MacVoices Live. You should be here live with us in YouTube. We are on at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, whatever time it is, wherever you are. We'd love to have you in the chat room to comment, argue, speculate, comment with us. But if not, you still get to see these on the regular MacVoices feed. We hope you enjoy those as much as we enjoy doing them, and as much as the live channel here, the chat room seems to enjoy them as well. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about 1Password moving to Electron. Now, if you know what I'm talking about, then great. You may be one up on some of us, and you may not. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, we're going to hear from the panel and see who's here. So taking my screen, as I always do, first up, Mr. Mike Schmitz, coming to us from an undisclosed location. Mike, good to have you.
Thanks, Chuck. I'm glad to be here.
And we should notice that you are on the road. I think it means that you escaped just ahead of the authorities. And so you don't have your usual setup, but you sound certainly more than good enough to be part of this group.
That's true. Yeah, I don't have my fancy microphone, and I was nervous about that. Even sent you a message before. I said, is it okay if I don't have it? Can I still come on? And you said, sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's good to have you. Next up, we missed him last week, but he's back, Mr. Jeff Gamet. Jeff, welcome.
I missed all of you too, and I'm happy to be back. It's great to get to hang out with every single one of you. I've actually been seriously looking forward to this evening.
Well, good. Well, we were looking forward to having you back. I'm glad that you survived your travel.
Same. Yes. Coming back from travel, having not survived, usually a bad sign.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but you'll never know it.
Good point.
Yeah. Commenting on Mr. Gamet's travel is Mr. Serle.
I haven't gone anywhere ever. I want to go someplace all right, at some bleak.
I met you at Mac Stock a couple of years ago.
I know. I want to. I'm supposed to go there. I'm supposed to go to Chicago area end of September, but I'm looking.
Did I hear a butt?
Well, the problem is right now it's getting a car. Rental cars are like gold right now. They're really tough to get. So trying to get one ahead of time, because it's weird. I don't think I'm going to be able to walk from O'Hare Airport to Woodstock. It's just the thing. So we'll see. But I'm looking at all my options. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I'm going to be there for Mike and Dave and everybody else who might show up.
Lewis and Clark did it, Guy. I'm sure you can do it.
Yeah, but they had months. I don't have months.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, you should have planned ahead.
I should have. Thank you.
Yeah. Lots of beef jerky.
Leave now.
Yeah, there you go.
I just made him cough on that one.
We got him.
You've got a thumb. I don't see the problem.
Yeah, we finally got him.
Another good point.
Yeah, who's going to pick up a bald 6'6" guy with weird T-shirts and hats on an interstate highway?
I'm just
in
saying.
a pandemic.
The you don't want
in a pandemic.
Yeah,
the people that are out looking for Yetis. Those are the ones.
I do wear size 16 shoes.
There you go.
That's a lot of foot.
It is almost like it's a Bigfoot.
Ooh, yeah.
Huh.
And in the chat from Cletus says, and an Indian guide. So there you go.
Native American guide. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Yes, Cletus, American Indian or Native American. Sorry. Ugh, God. Next up, sporting a very unusual background tonight, Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark, good to have you.
Hello, Chuck. Hello, everyone. Hello, listeners. I think as we get into this, the interpretation of this background will become clearer. My internet connection for some reason tonight is spastic, and the panel has frozen at least half a dozen or more times now. So hopefully I can participate in a real-time fashion. If not, we'll all be frozen like Guy is channeling right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to learning more about the background as we go. Mr. Jim Ray is here too, and Jim said he did some prep, so he may be our Electron expert. Welcome, Jim. Good to see you.
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay. A little bit. Let's see.
Well,
Mr.
that's
Ginsburg.
more than any of us did.
I don't know about that. David Ginsburg is back with us. Last week he got knocked out by a thunderstorm and had to sit out the panel. But this time he's back, and I'm hoping there are no thunderstorms in your area, David.
Oh, nice, beautiful day. Good to be back. Thanks for having me. Let's have some fun tonight.
Sounds good to me. Brittany Smith has decided to brave this crew. Brittany, good to have you as always.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
That's it, Brittany?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. You want to show your
what else you
t-shirt
want?
to your
Yes.
t-shirt to the crew?
You do.
I
It's one
love
of my
this t-shirt.
favorites.
Yes.
'Tis better to have shot and missed than never to have shot at all. With
There you
stormtroopers
go.
on it for the audio only
Yeah.
people.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, a little context would probably be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I forget about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not a
had friends on
professional
that Death Star.
podcaster like all of you.
Uh,
What have you heard?
yes. Sneaking in under the wire is Kelly Gamet. Kelly, it's good to have you.
I heard someone was wrong on the internet. I came as soon as I could.
It was me.
Oh, this is going to be an interesting, fun group tonight. No question about that.
We'll probably get to the topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so as I alluded to,
There's a topic.
Yes, there's a topic. Yes. 1Password came out with a beta of the new version, and it is written in Electron as opposed to being a traditional Mac app. And this seems to have caused some consternation among certain factions in the Mac community. And I'm kind of curious to see what this group thinks about it. And does it make any difference to any of us? And Jim, as I said, you told me you did some prep, so I'm going to let you kind of run with this, explaining what Electron is, and maybe you can explain why it has caused so much discussion.
I think I can. Electron is a tool that allows desktop applications to be made using web technologies instead of the usual programming tools that are used. And basically, it's a combination of a Chrome rendering engine, or Chromium actually, which is what Chrome uses, and something called Node.js, which is a little engine that runs JavaScript. So it's kind of like a single window Chrome browser. There's been apps like Fluid where you could set up an app that runs just one web page. Has anybody ever seen that? There's several apps like that. And now that's something that anybody can just take a website and essentially make their own little app. And that's really what Electron is, but it goes a little further since instead of making it web-based, it's JavaScript-based. But it's the same tool. So a developer goes in and makes this thing that basically just launches usually one window with HTML rendering inside it. But instead of filling it from a web server, it starts off with run this JavaScript code. And a lot of times the JavaScript will go to some server and then populate it. But it doesn't have to. You can make a completely standalone Electron app that just runs on JavaScript locally and makes things happen. Now, of course, Chrome and JavaScript, they already work on every desktop platform out there. They run on the Mac, runs on Windows, runs on Linux, right? So it's very cost effective for a developer to create a multi-platform Electron app that runs on all applications. The same code can run everywhere. So theoretically, the developer only has to write a quarter of the code. Instead of having to write a separate Mac app, Windows app, Linux app, and web app, they just write one app and it runs everywhere. So bean counters just love this. And in a lot of cases, a company might already have a web app. They've already written it, like Slack, for example. So they're practically done. They just have to do a little bit of extra tweaking, and they've got an app by using Electron. And another potential advantage for larger companies is that there's a much larger pool of JavaScript programmers out there than specialized Swift or Objective-C developers. So they'll probably save on salaries and find it easier to recruit. So for, people in management, they're like, this is great. We can save tons of money. We, recruit easier, and, we've got apps on every platform. Now, I've said that it's basically a web browser. There is some customization that Electron allows the developer to do beyond what you can do in a straight web app. For example, an Electron app can have a standard menu bar. So you can write some extra JavaScript code that says, make a menu bar. Obviously, a web page can't change the menu bar. When you're running in Safari or Chrome, the web page can't reach up and change menus. But Electron can do that. Although, for whatever reason, a lot of Electron apps don't use menus very much. For example, in the Slack app we all use, that's an Electron app. I think the only menu I've ever used in Slack is quit. And I was looking at it yesterday. There are some other commands there, and it's like I was looking at them. I'm like, I never use any of these. They're, and I think it's because these things are really designed web first, and the menus are just an afterthought. And whatever extra customization, it's pretty limited, and it's limited to the things that are available on all the platforms. So menus and like file open save dialogues. You can make a Electron developer can make it say, open this file or save a file, which you can't do in just a regular web. Yeah, but like anything that's unique to one platform is not available and can't be done in Electron unless, now you can, as I said, they're all written in JavaScript, but you can, JavaScript does have the ability, and especially through Node, to write extensions which are native, so they could be written in C or Objective-C or Swift, but that's expensive. It requires specialized knowledge, so you got to have somebody that knows that language. And then it also renders the code, non-cross-platform. So if you make some extension that takes advantage of some Mac feature, that's not going to work on Windows. It's not going to work on Linux. So, and there's some features, like as far as I can tell, it's impossible to implement AppleScript support in an Electron app. So you can't make and a scriptable app at all. And, I was looking around, and, there are some pretty complicated Electron apps that don't even use, standard menus at all. And they build like their own menu system into the browser window. So they'll just have a file menu that basically quit is it, and they don't use any of the others. And even like normal functions like open and save are not in the standard Mac, menu bar at all. There are quite a few apps that you might have heard of, like Basecamp, CrashPlan, Discord, Figma, Microsoft Teams, Skype, Slack, Tidal, Twitch, Visual Studio Code, WhatsApp. Those are all done in Electron. Notice that a lot of those, probably the majority, are paired with online services, which kind of makes sense. If you have an online service, you can use Electron to turn it into an app in a jiffy. Looking on the Electron website, there's hundreds of apps that people have done in Electron, most of which we've never heard of. I have a bunch of other stuff about what the possible disadvantages are of using Electron, but maybe I've been already talking for like 5 minutes straight with no interruption. So maybe I should, we could come back to some of those. Or, it's up to you, but maybe this is a good spot for me. At least that's the overview of what, and I've got some thoughts about 1Password specifically too.
That's what's
Okay.
happening. Like, that's the mechanics of what it is. Here's why people are mad.
Okay.
One
Kelly,
password.
I'm going to ask you to hold on for a second. Because
Okay.
Mark had in the chat room, and I want to make sure his points are. Mark, I'm hoping they're objective, because then we'll let Kelly talk about why everybody's mad. Because I think that is something that needs to be understood.
Yeah,
and I've got thoughts on that too, but I didn't want to talk for 25 minutes. I did quite a bit of research, actually.
Yes,
so,
you did.
Yeah, so I looked at this last week, too, and sort of it seems to me that the combination of Chromium and and Node, basically gives them the capability of an interactive scripted browser. So basically, they can they can create their same native web-based interface across all platforms. And there was a blog post that was over on 6Colors that somebody, maybe it was you, Jim, or maybe it was Frank Petrie, who posted in our Slack channel earlier today. But I think a lot of what you've discussed so far seems to indicate that's sort of the user-facing technologies. The other thing they have been talking about is Rust, and you didn't address that. And I'm just wondering if
I haven't finished, but
okay, because sort of maybe fast forwarding this a little bit, it seems to me, just reading what they're saying is they're basically saying, hey, look, we're this is my interpretation and my coloring on top of their message, which is basically, we're dying trying to support the same functionality across all these platforms. It rips us up. We don't have enough control that, one team on one platform adds another feature, and, it basically, takes everybody else by surprise, and that hurts everybody's feelings and makes us look dumb in front of customers, because people say, well, if you have this on platform X, why is it not on platform Y? So it seems like, what they're trying to do is re-architect so that they can have a development platform. So number one, they're in control. They can offer the same features on all platforms at the same time. And the way to do that is using web tools. It abstracts you away from a lot of the low-level intricacies about the different platforms. And their blog posts, and they talk about some of the, well, they don't share a lot of details. They just allude to some of the challenges they've had with Apple support across different releases and different versions of OS. So this whole thing of Electron is sort of the user-facing piece. I'm thinking Rust might be their back end, where they do their secure crypto and other things, because anything that's done in JavaScript, somebody is going to be able to get out there, see it, and be able to reverse engineer it and thus exploit it. So I was suspecting that a lot of their top secret IP in terms of what they do with crypto, et cetera, that's probably what they're going to be doing in Rust. And that probably seems like maybe it, is basically sort of a, it's a batch engine that just, sucks in data and outputs data. It seems like that is a little less changed, subject to change and jerk around surprises that, I know Apple, unleashes on their developers. So, it seems to me that, this is a natural evolution and stepping stone. And to the extent that some people are saying, and I think Jason Sell's article, I think he got it wrong, and I hopefully just wrote it, for clickbait, saying, oh, well, Apple's not important enough anymore. Well, it seems to me they're going overboard to say, yes, we want to continue to support the Mac, but we have other expanded objectives that we want to provide the same sort of capability across all these additional other platforms.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by Smile, the makers of Text Expander, my most used productivity utility. It is easy to recommend Text Expander by Smile to you because I'm a regular user. By regular, I mean every hour, multiple times every hour. If I'm working, and it seems like I always am, I am using Text Expander. Text Expander lets me insert signatures, standard answers to questions, phone numbers, frequently asked for information, HTML code, and more with just a few keystrokes. And it doesn't take long to set up a new Text Expander snippet once I've identified something that I'm repeatedly typing. Just copy that information, go to the Text Expander app, paste it in as text or HTML or whatever it is, give it a name, and identify the text shortcut, and you are done. It can take less than a minute, but it can save you hours of your valuable time. Want all the what's, whys, and how's and a free trial? Visit textexpander.com/podcast for all that and more. That's textexpander.com/podcast to get started with Text Expander from Smile, the makers of world-class software. Thanks to Smile for their ongoing support of MacVoices.
Fast forward a little bit for me, I think that what AgileBits has done is probably the right thing for them. There's a long backstory of now I think that what Jason Snell said is absolutely right, that this is totally an indication that the Mac is an afterthought for AgileBits. And it probably should be. Unfortunately, that's where the world is. The Mac is an afterthought. And the Rust part is sort of like, that's fine. That's got nothing to do with the front end.
So do you want to describe quickly what Rust is, so that all our listeners and everyone, in case if they don't understand,
right.
Bring them up to speed.
Well, it's a programming language like C or Swift or it's a compiled language like C or Swift or Objective-C. JavaScript is interpreted. So compiled languages, the source code gets turned into native machine code that runs on the processor's language. Where JavaScript is what's called interpreted. It's not turned into machine code by the developer. It's sent as is to each user's computer, and then there's this interpreter that runs the JavaScript on each on your computer. And because so basically, a compiler does a bunch of work in advance to make sure that the code can run as fast as possible. And interpreter doesn't do that, so it runs a lot slower, 10 to 100 times slower generally. And the thing is, today's computers are so fast that for a lot of things, that doesn't matter. Another thing about Rust in this particular application, it's a really pretty new language. I think 2015, something like that. And so it's not gotten very wide adoption yet. It's not used by any user interface frameworks,
But it doesn't need to be.
Well, for this application, it doesn't. But, basically, it has to be used in a back-end capacity, like what 1Password, like I think it's mostly probably used on servers, because it always takes extra work to mix different languages in a project. But it also has, and I have not studied Rust too much. I've never used it, but it apparently has some really good features for helping write secure code, and it's much more difficult to do things like write code with buffer overflows and a lot of mistakes that are endemic in, say, C, which is very widely used, 40 years old now. They're just impossible to write in Swift. So theoretically, and we haven't seen that play out in the real world yet, but I expect it will. But theoretically, it's much, code written in Rust is going to wind up being more secure and have less security issues. But that's kind of a canard in this particular thing, because there's no reason that they couldn't have a Rust backend with an AppKit front end, instead of an Electron front end. So the fact that they use Rust for the back end is, it's an interesting decision in its own right. And, that's, a whole topic, but it really has nothing to do with users, and it doesn't have anything to do with the choice of, what front end user interface framework they use. For example, they're apparently using Rust also on iOS and on Android. So, they are pairing Rust with Apple framework. They could have done it with AppKit. I'm not saying they should have. I'm just saying they could have. And, basically, this all comes down to the AgileBits decided it just wasn't worth the money to make an AppKit front end for their new version, which
Well, actually, I would add it's for them in the market they're in is money. They've raised $300 million of venture funding. Money is not the issue. It's probably just the time and the time cost of being jerked around by new bugs and new different things, and looking stupid because they can introduce features on one platform and it takes them a lot longer to do it on another. I think for them it's the opportunity cost measured in time that's more important.
Time is money.
Okay, I want to get some of the other people in, and I agree with you, Kelly. So everybody on the panel is typing things into our private chat room here. So I'm going to take them in order. Mike, I wanted to make sure you jumped in because the first thing you said was Obsidian. I know right now that's a big thing for you, and that's written in Electron, is it not?
It is, yes. And Obsidian is probably my favorite application ever, and I use it on a Mac. And that really has me thinking, like, what is a Mac app anyways? And we're talking about all this technical stuff, and I'm not a developer. So to me, I don't really care. I just want it not to act weird, right? And one of the things that I did not know about Electron apps was that single window limitation. Notion is another Electron app that I use every single day because that's what we manage all of our projects with at the Suite Setup. And I hate using the application because I can't open a new window. I'm stuck with a single view. And when I want to see the calendar over here and the project page over here, I can't do that. I have to go to the web. So at that point, I am running into the limitations of Electron, but I never run into those limitations in Obsidian. And I kind of can't picture a scenario where it would be a big deal in 1Password either. I think part of the problem is 1Password has a big history on the Mac, making you purchase it one time and you have your local vaults. And they've already had the turn signal last year or a couple of years ago, maybe with version 7, that they are moving to these vaults that sync across all your devices and adding all these extra features on top of a subscription service, which they kind of have to do because otherwise Apple's keychain is going to just eat their lunch. So if you're 1Password, that's where you kind of have to go anyways. And then you take a whole bunch of money, and now the Mac is not the sandbox for you to play in. It's a much larger market, and you got to figure out a way to make that to make that worth your time. And it's kind of this weird, awkward phase I think we find them in right now. I think when version 8 ships, most people aren't going to notice as long as they're cool just syncing their vaults wherever. But there are lots of other things that can make an app feel like a good Mac app. Like one of the things that I love about Obsidian is the URL scheme support. And URL schemes I know are not Mac specific, but in my opinion, a good Mac app will have support for something like these URL schemes. And there are a lot of Mac native apps, especially in with email, which I would argue are not good Mac citizens because they try to hijack those like message : / URL schemes, and they try to insert their own proprietary ones. So you have to use that application if you want to open one of those links. If you want to put a link from an email message in something like Spark or Airmail in a task manager so you can click on it and get to it later, it's going to have a proprietary URL scheme. And that's a deal breaker for me. It's why I use MailMate. And I just, that's an example of like lots of other people are trying to cut corners, and tip things in their favor. And so I don't think what 1Password is doing here is all that surprising. And I'm not willing to say this is absolutely the wrong move. I understand it's really awkward for longtime Mac users, and I would put myself in that camp, but let's just see how it shakes out, because I don't think Electron's all that bad.
Okay.
Well-
Kelly, this is your big moment. Go for it. Why is everybody mad?
Well, okay. First of all, there's a few things going on. The first one I want to point out is that none of the cryptography or encryption methods that 1Password uses are secret. None of that is secret. They make all of it public. It's all published. It's all open and easily available for everyone to review, so that anyone who wants to review it can, which makes it more secure. Now, that doesn't mean they're giving my specific hash out to people and showing all of the other things that went into generating it. That's a whole other show. And if we want to talk about that someday, when Chuck decides to get into sleep stories or something, I am happy to sign up for that. However, that's not what we're here to talk about today. So none of that stuff is secret. I think the Rust stuff is meant to be on the back end, and there's a couple of massive changes in 8 that I think are part of why people are howling. And the first is there is no more non-subscription option. If you want to use 1Password version 8, and at some point there will be no option but 8, it's not soon or anything like that. Like go get a paper bag, take a deep breath, it'll be okay. It's not tomorrow. But at some point, like version 7 is going to no longer function on the current version of Mac OS or whatever. And at that point, if all you can do is go to version 8 in order to make sure that it's still going to run on your computer, then you are going to have to subscribe, period. Again, whole other podcast. What does and does not happen with that, how it feels, whatever. In 7, you could buy a license and it was complicated, but it could be done. And in 8, there is no option for that. So that's the first thing people are mad about. We've seen subscription screeching before. And spoiler alert, kids, we're going to see it again. So that said, second of all, the other thing I wanted to point out, Mike, you mentioned URL schemes. And URL schemes first for a lot of people, I think, came to iOS, because that was a way that you could do cool crap with like Launch Center Pro. And that's how a lot of things happen in shortcuts, is that you can get a little callback URL and do the thing with the stuff and then magic.
The way you had to do it. Right?
Like, yeah, that was the only choice you had. So that's another thing I think is sort of interesting about the URL piece of this, is that. And also, I'm so glad I'm not the only person I know that uses MailMate. That makes me really happy. But that's it. So, God, all that plain text, it just warms my heart. Anyway, so there's 2 things people are mad about. First of all, Electron. And I think a lot of people are unnecessarily upset about Electron because the people who are screaming the loudest are sometimes the people who haven't even sat down and spent time with the app and installed it, taken a look at it and gone, it lacks the fundamental functionality that I want out of 1Password. Like version 7 does X, and there is no methodology for that in version 8. Like I'm hearing some of that feedback, but it's getting lost in subscriptions, Electron, or if you are a casual 1Password spectator, we'll say, right? You're a casual user. You're not somebody who used to work there. You're not somebody who has a vested interest in making all of this better. If you're just sort of watching it go by, then what you have is those guys used to show up at Macworld. They were really nice. They were friendly to everyone. They answered all my questions. They were cool when we were still the cool kids club over here before anybody had a phone from Apple or any of that stuff. Like, you could get a solid password manager from 1Password. They had response to people. You could sync stuff via Dropbox, so you could have it on your other computer at the same time. It was great. Then they decided to make a Windows version. They decided to make an Android version because, people use those platforms. And if you want all your stuff to be on all your stuff, you need to make a version for all your stuff. So shifting to that, if that was the only change that they made, and there were some minimal concessions made, we'll say, then if those concessions were made in order for it to be an Electron app so that everybody had the same stuff everywhere, then I don't think there would be the outrage that there is, first of all. And second of all, the other piece of it, I think, is that the people who have actual feedback like that, this thing that it does, or this layout that is a Mac only layout, those sorts of things, like those things are getting eliminated because everybody's going to get the same app. Slack is the primary example of this, because I know loads and loads of people who use Slack. If you open Slack on your MacBook Pro, whether it's Intel or M1 or Hamster, whatever, it's going to look exactly the same as it does on Windows, as it does on Windows 8 and Windows 10 and every place else that you can run it, because it's the same app. Now, from an engineering standpoint, that's really nice because you can work on one set of code. You can have more or less one set of bugs. From what I know from Electron developers, there are still some things that are a little bit platform specific, but by and large, you're just going to get a chance to like work on one big blob of code at the end. So that's great. But for a spectator, here's what we see. These guys were awesome Mac OS developers, iOS developers. They get mentioned at DubDub. They get mentioned in like the iPhone stuff. You know, when we get the new version of the operating system, we get Password Kit. So now you can use 1Password to get all your passwords and all your stuff. And isn't that going to be amazing? Like they called it out specifically when they opened up the password filling technology to everybody else. Like they called out, like, you can use 1Password now. That's basically what they said. And it was wonderful and everyone was excited about it. And now those guys who were like our cool indie Mac buddies took a bunch of money and sold out. If you are a casual observer, that's what happened, because they took a bunch of money, they made a Windows version, they took a bunch more money, they hired a truckload of people, and now they're not cool anymore. Like they signed a major label deal and they don't love us anymore.
As you can tell, Kelly is rolling. We're going to give her a chance to catch her breath and come back in the next edition of Mac Voices. Let her continue her comments and thoughts on the 1Password Electron situation. And then other members of the panel weigh in as to why this is important, whether it matters to you as a user, how it matters to the Mac developer community, and what the implications are going forward for all parties involved. That's next time on Mac Voices, and I hope you will join us. Until then, as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.